This is Michael Doermann, and you are watching the Break It Down Show.
I love getting a chance to talk to a lot of different people on the show about military things. I'm not a Navy guy, but I know a lot of you, and it's always interesting how the Navy approaches different problems or problems differently. For example, like staying relevant in a modern combat. Like, okay, we know battleships aren't a thing, and it could be in the very near future that that aircraft carriers aren't really a thing. But then again, the ability to take an aircraft carrier group and put it off the shore of some place, boy, that's some classic Navy presence. I mean, it's crazy. Like we don't have that in the Army. Like, okay, right now, if we wanted to stop the fentanyl crisis, we could put a brigade on the other side of the border, but we don't do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of unique things that we can do as the Navy. All you have to do is sail a little bit offshore, and now you're in international waters. And it's kind of hard to do that with ground troops or anything like that. So definitely a little bit different. There's a lot of similarities too, though. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm saying brigade because a brigade and a carrier group, they're roughly the same size. You're talking thousands of people and a lot of assets.
Yes.
And so like with the Navy, you've got things flying overhead. You've got any kind of electronic intelligence assets, and just a lot more things focused on what's going on in this part of the world. And again, when a carrier group shows up, if you're North Korea, you have to go, oh, I am now paying attention to this thing that's out there, right? It's impossible to ignore.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you like that? Do you like that capability to just show up and be a gentle menace, I guess, if we were trying to characterize it? Or how would you characterize it when a carrier group shows up? What is that equal to the other side?
It's really complex because in most part of the world, we have our adversaries or people that maybe we don't get along with as well, and so they're looking at us one way, but then a lot of times our presence is a double whammy, because then you have all of our allies in an area and they love it when we show up. And so part of it is being there to show folks that maybe are up to no good that, hey, we're around, and then the other part of it is if there's a natural disaster or something like that, that same ship that can pose such a threat to our adversaries can also be a huge relief to show up parked off the shore of a country that's just had some sort of natural disaster, and we're able to put our engineering plant to work, like generating electricity for emergency response, or we could create water, all sorts of incredible things that you can do with these ships. So it's a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
When you think about like the classic Navy example, like you want to go in harm's way, but it seems like the bulk of what you guys do is a positive presence, generating water, electricity. Here comes our hospital ship, and you're providing something other than the big stick. You guys are there to help out in a time of crisis and provide capacity where there literally is no other country in the world that could show up and say, we're going to indefinitely pump fresh water into vessels for you.
Right. Yeah. It's like I said, it's such a cool thing to be a part of. I have yet to participate in any of those humanitarian type missions. I would absolutely love to do that. And I think as a country, international relations, thinking on in those terms, such a powerful asset that we have with either a carrier strike group or an amphibious readiness group. You can just send them and help out in huge ways, and send messages through humanitarian efforts that in some ways might be more powerful than we could even with all of the gunpowder and lethality that also is present on those same ships.
When we look at what's coming in modern conflict, we're seeing a bit of an example of it between Russia and Ukraine. It does seem like something as, I don't want to say outmoded, but it's hard for the Navy to stay relevant and ahead of things. If there's a hypersonic missile, what are we going to do? You have to try to deal with all of these problems. Drone capability is only getting exponentially stronger and more dangerous. Is there, I mean, look, no one's going to cross the T anymore in a formation. I think we talked about this on the phone. It's just not a thing that you even need to worry about because getting that close to a ship isn't necessary to cause a ruckus.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of developments that are happening. There's some really interesting episodes on the Proceedings podcast that's put out by the United States Naval Institute, where they talk about how we're going to do like distributed maritime operations, where our ships aren't aggregating in like in groups together, like in close proximity, but we're trying to kind of extend our ability to cause effects, integrating with the Marine Corps, working with all sorts of communications equipment, all kinds of redundancies, so that we can kind of reach from a distance and touch areas that we want to have an effect on, and kind of adapt, like you're saying. Like, we're not going to be crossing the T, but what can we do? How can we still have the same effect, but do it differently? It's a pretty complex problem.
It is. Let me make it a little more complex. You say affect, I think affect, because affect with an A is more powerful in modern conflict. You know, you think about like we want to win hearts and minds. That's affective, not effective. And so if you think about when you guys show up, you were creating affects. You were showing up, and is it like, hey, the Americans are here. This is great. They're helpful. Hey, this is our partner. They help keep us safe from our regional enemies. You know, what emotional response are we creating through showing up? And I think in modern conflict, it's a hugely powerful thing to be able to create whatever that thing is, whether it's fear or submission or whatever the emotion is that we want to create. If we don't track that and we think effect only, and my example is always, we just had Valentine's Day, right? If you write your favorite person or your point of attraction 15 love letters, and you then go say, okay, now we're in love. Well, that's not a very good approach, because you haven't thought about the affect. What are these letters creating? And are they expanding your love? Or because you look, we're going to go in and we're going to visit 40 countries this year. Okay, well, what did we leave in our wake? Like, what was the result of that? So when you think about how complex these problems are, affect is not. And I'll tell you right now, I think affect, from my experience, affect is way bigger and more powerful than effect.
Absolutely, yeah. I was kind of referring more to like if we were to wage war on someone, and it was like kinetic. How can we reach out and achieve the effects? You know, the tactical effects we want on them. But that topic you refer to is super important as well. And like you said, it's even more complex, because, you know, just pulling into port, doing a port visit on deployment, you know, you can either go out in town, you know, get wasted and start yelling and screaming at people. And now when people think of Americans, you're who they remember, you know, or, you know, you can go out and have a more positive influence. So which is one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you, just because of that background that you have in interacting with local populations and that sort of thing. And I'm, you know, excited for my next assignment in Bahrain, and hopefully I'll be able to build some good relationships with some of the folks out there. But there's a lot of exposure that someone like me, who just goes and does a port visit, has. And, you know, they might see United States in the news, but now they're looking at someone from the United States and like having a conversation with them. And now what are they going to think? There's those affects that happen as a ship, but then as an individual sailor, when you go out in town on a port visit, that's a whole thing too. So very, very complicated.
Well, and like you're talking about the role of the Navy, the Air Force also, you know, even the Space Force, like we have these things where how do we fit these folks into conflict, right? And I'll just say conflict because that's a bigger world than say combat. And when you're in the Navy, you've got to figure out what it is you're going to contribute to the fight. And if you're not crossing the T, how do you become relevant? And so now, and this is the interesting thing, is you see SEALs doing the SF mission, you know, of foreign internal defense. You see Navy guys coming into the middle of the desert to do advising, and we're all forced to adapt, be something that doctrinally that's not what we do, right? And so God bless, like we need to figure this out and figure out how we do it. And given our record of 0-2 from the last big wars, and you want to say we tied Iraq, there's some positive things from Iraq, but we certainly didn't finish up the job in Afghanistan. So should Navy people, should Air Force people be on the ground engaging, or should you guys be focused on that? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that if you're going to sit across from someone and learn how to partner, you damn well better be a professional about it, because we don't take that role seriously. And I would say, this is just me talking in general, but let's talk about this after, as soon as I shut up. But just because you're a commander doesn't make you qualified to engage the local populace, because you have a different job.
Right. Yep.
But that's not how we roll, though. The commander's the boss, and he does whatever or she, they do whatever they want, depending on the kind of unit you're in. And that creates real problems if you don't have the capacity to accurately and properly and effectively engage well.
Right. Yeah. I just laughed because, you know, in the Marine Corps, they always say, you know, like every Marine's a rifleman and, you know, that sort of thing. In the Navy, I've heard them say like every sailor's a firefighter, you know, like that sort of thing. You know, basically at the same time, anytime you're going out and interacting with a local population, whether you're here in the US or overseas, you know, every member of the military is essentially a diplomat in a way. Like you gotta think about that. And unfortunately, not everyone does, you know, so that's not great. But
and so let me add to this. When you leave, you believe you've done a good job, but the next guy's got to pick up the pieces of what actually is there, you know. And if they think, oh, you know, Mr. Michael promised me a bunch of things because you guys were talking about projects, because you're absolutely going to do that. But their perception and their message that they've carried, whether false or true, is that Mr. Michael promised me all these things. And then your partner's like, who the hell is Mr. Michael? And why did he make my job so hard? And then 3 years later, you know, where your impact is no longer Mr. Michael. It's like, you guys always fail us on these projects we talk about. That partner now is carrying the weight of 3 and 4 Mr. Michaels who have said things and try to do their best, but we don't ever think. We have like not only like all these multiple 1-year war kind of concepts, we have complete amnesia as to what happened before, and we never accept our own role and like, wait, this is harder than I realized, and maybe I ought to slow the hell down and spend some time understanding what it is I'm trying to accomplish here and be as delicate as possible, because I'll tell you right now, international engagement like that, it's fraught with errors and problems and pitfalls.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's it's interesting. It's part of the reason one of the things I like so much about the job is the opportunity that I have to go to these really cool places, and interact with people that, you know, I'm absolutely never going to have an opportunity to interact with outside of this job. And I am sort of a diplomat for the United States, and I take that very seriously. I really like meeting people and getting to know them, so I enjoy engaging with them and trying to help them have a positive experience. But you know, that's kind of my goal the whole time. I'm not out there, like the Navy's not using me to like do something other than just being like, hey, go out in town, you know, have fun, be safe, like, you know, make good choices basically. But you know, I feel like we could do a lot of good, and it just, I don't know, it's not always the mission, you know. Sometimes the mission becomes, you know, something aside from that when maybe it shouldn't. And, you know, well, now I got to carry out the mission. I have my orders. I got to go do what I've been told. And now, you know, we're causing problems versus, you know, what we could be doing, which is building those relationships.
Yeah, that's a good point. Part of like I'm writing some things right now, and I look at like engagement in terms of in the Army, we'd say 10 level, like what's the beginner level? Like what's the basic skills you need to master to be able to actually start to do this job? And then you have professional grade, but then you have mastery. And someone like John McKay, who we're both friends with, and John and I have talked about this. One of the things we both enjoyed doing, we both independently discovered this. If you sit down and you have chai with a partner, you don't talk business at all. You don't spend 5 minutes like, well, I'm going to spend 5 minutes building rapport. Like, well, first off, building rapport has a pattern and you can measure it. And so if you're not measuring these things, you're just saying, now I have completed the steps, the, you know, 720 seconds required to build rapport. And now I'm moving into engagement, you know, or whatever. And this drives me. it's one of my tells when I know something's not right in the field is if the Army person or the Navy, whoever it is there and they're engaging with me and they say, my boss wants you to do this. And I'm like, oh boy, this person has no idea. But to their defense, there isn't really a professional school. Like you have to go through all of these different jobs on your way up through the ranks in the Navy. Like we were just talking about emergency response on a ship, and you have to learn that so you can go get into that literature and learn like, how do I run this program? And how do I do a good job at that? And so you're forced to either self-develop or go to courses, whatever. Like every Navy person's a firefighter. Well, that means you go to fire school and you take seriously fighting fires in a variety of settings with a variety of different things you're going to knock down. We don't do that with engagement. We just don't.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what I was thinking earlier is, in the way that every time you go out and interact with people, you are a diplomat. Like you said, though, we don't train to that as heavily as we could. And I think the impact that we could have, the positive impact as a country, if we were to focus a little bit more on that, would be massive. And we could hopefully avoid conflict just by focusing on how we present ourselves and what sorts of relationships we're building with the people around us.
One of the things I learned from all of my deployments was that I had to spend more time looking at us, even as a spy. Like my job is to help like us win. And if I can reduce how much we're causing our own failure, that's a form of winning. It's not sexy, but it turns out the guys that have the bombs, they don't want to be found. And to go find them, you've got to put a lot of things in jeopardy. And still, they just go to plan B, right? It's very, very difficult to play in that space. But there's so much waste in our effort because we're so out of scope. We're so ill prepared that if I simply focused on us, and this is 100% true, I would spend more than half my time dealing with us and trying to improve our capacity. And also, it was more dangerous for me on the camp than off. No one's going to actually physically kill me on the camp, but that staff member will stick a knife in my back and never tell me, ask me out to lunch to get more knives stuck in me, or whatever it's going to be. I got kicked off of camp. Michael, I have been kicked out of theater, fired, talked bad about, delegitimized, everything. People come after you when you try to improve the organization. What are your thoughts?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's a delicate line to try and walk, but I think that we do an amazing job in some areas. Like I was mentioning to you before, I've gotten to experience some of how the Navy's reacted and changed since the incident with the Bonhomme Richard, and seen how we've improved and changed in a way that hopefully we would be able to prevent something like that from happening again. And I personally feel like we've gotten a lot better, and we absolutely would be able to, have a different outcome if something like that were to happen again. And there's other areas in the surface warfare community. That's what I do. I help drive ships. I help manage the crew. One thing that we really focus on is like incidents, like collisions. And unfortunately, we've had several collisions/incidents in the last few decades that don't look good on us and make us look very unprofessional. But since then, the Navy's done some really excellent things. Here on the base in San Diego, they have a school for surface warfare officers where they have these simulators and they put you in these situations where, okay, now I have to figure out how am I going to avoid collision in this situation? How am I going to do it in that situation? And just expose you to all these scenarios. So that then when you actually do get out there and you're standing watch on the bridge, telling the helmsman, steer this way, do this, do that, you're informed and you know what you're doing. And we're able to, I think, make some huge improvements there. The school there is awesome.
I love it.
Go
ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to finish that thought. I think it would be excellent for some of the people that developed those schools to apply what is obviously great talent that they have in developing systems to better ourselves. Apply those same methods to create a system to where we can train every sailor, Marine, soldier, help them see how important it is when you go out in town, try to interact in this way and not that way. I think that would be really, really meaningful.
Yeah. And where is that simulator for sitting down and working with the partner, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like you have to master a lot of things. It's a sales job. You're learning body language. There's all these things that you have to have at least a handle on. And that always just begs the question, like, is it too much? Is it too much to expect a commander to be able to put his to put his fleet in harm's way and be lethal, and lethal as hell, win fights against punching above his weight, right?
Yeah.
And be good at talking to sheikhs and the suburbs of Baghdad. Like, is that too
Yeah.
much to expect of
And
people?
who do we got to convince to pay money to
Oh my
develop
God.
the system to train the
Yeah.
soldiers? Like, it's not an easy problem to solve, but I think there's plenty there to justify more effort than is being spent now, and I think a lot of good impact could come from that.
We love you talked about like the training improvements in terms of collisions. We've seen that. We want that improvement, and it doesn't even make sense. We're like, how are you guys smashing ships into each other? That doesn't, but obviously it's always happened, right? But we can get fixated on these freak things that happen. We were talking about the fire, and is that a freak thing? And is that something that you can't control chaos? And so do you spend all this energy and institutional knowledge and resources trying to prevent chaos? Or do you say that's going to happen every now and then? We accept it. It's going to always be a tragedy and very expensive, but I'd rather focus, because at some point you do run out of bandwidth and you have to balance what you're going to take on.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you gotta, like you said, you can't prevent everything, but just knowing where to put your priority is super important. And I'm pretty new to the Navy. I haven't been in for very long, so I'm not gonna solve all these problems. But
what? Come on.
Yeah, no way. But I think, like I said, there's some areas that we do a very good job in learning and growing and changing. And I think I've said it already, but I think it would be great to spend a little time training the sailors on how to use like liberty in port as a mission, and try and help them see the importance of that, because a lot of them, the second they get off the ship, they've got one thing on their mind, so trying to control that chaos is very, very interesting conundrum.
So how important is it for a commander, whether you're running a team, a group, a ship, a fleet of ships, how important is it to recognize people who have a knack for that and say, hey, we want to get you out of this engineer track that you're on and get you on the people engagement side? Because even though you're I don't know, just an E4, right? Like you're a low ranking person, we realize that what you signed up for and where you could be going. I mean, that's somebody's job, right? To identify talent and keep it within the Navy and get it trained up to where it needs to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't get to participate in that on a huge scale just yet. I'm just a division officer, so I'll just control. I just help, lead a small group on the ship. But I know I've helped some of my sailors who have an excellent work ethic and a lot of potential. Put in packages to try and go to OCS or that sort of thing. I think that's very important, and trying within the organization to create ways to incentivize those people who are working hard, putting their best foot forward. They're going to help make the Navy look good. It's super important for us to try and hold on to those people, make working for the Navy valuable to them, because we're going to get more from those kinds of people than we can ever give to them. So we got to identify those people and do whatever we can to train them, help them advance, keep them challenged, because that way they'll keep growing and utilize them to their fullest potential. That's super important.
I'm curious what you think, because these things are all little notches on the dial. So if I'm an officer, I'm going to look around. I'm like, you know what? Anytime I see someone that's got potential, I'm going to get them out of my section and I'm going to get them somewhere else where their potential can be realized. Yeah, I'm going to keep some of the guys. I'm going to run a good section, but hey, kid, I need you to go to OCS, right? I need you to go to Green to Gold. Get out of here, go to school. Let's get you, and I'm saying Green to Gold, that's the Army program, whatever. Let's get you out of the enlisted ranks. Let's get you to school, get you educated, and turn you into an officer. man, I don't think you can do enough of that. Like to recognize talent and say, hey, I see you working hard, I see you good work ethic. Let's give you more to work on. But I
Yeah.
don't get the feeling that we default to too much of that. Like it's more like, oh, I don't know if you got the stuff to be an officer or a SEAL or whatever it is. Like, no, let's let these guys prove their mettle and push them out there. Do you think that the Navy could twist that knob towards more like identify, and get into the right program?
I think, man, I haven't thought a whole lot about that, like Navy wide.
Right.
But I think, at least on like the ship that I've been a part of, I think our chain of command was pretty good at that, and they were good at recognizing people and helping put them in good positions. The Navy has an interesting kind of dynamic where you can join the Navy as like an undesignated seaman, where you don't really have a rate or a job. You're just
Right.
on the ship helping out. And some of those sailors get really disgruntled because they're doing some of the jobs that aren't
Yeah.
very fun, painting the side of the ship, stuff like that. And but some of them now are going to they're going to go be a paralegal for the Navy basically, and go work with JAGs and do some really cool, awesome jobs. But you can only do that with a small number of people, and the organization can only afford to do that so much. You do need to have good, hard workers in those jobs, even the sucky ones. And so I don't know if I could really answer how the Navy's doing as a whole, but I think in the command I worked with, I felt like we did a good job trying to get those people set up for success. So that was really good to see, at least at that one command.
I know in the Army, there's like a vibe where like the unit you were in is the best unit ever, and the unit you are in is the worst. And then you leave that unit, and you're like, man, that unit was the best, And so we have trouble in the Army. We tend to think that, these units that I was in, like they're an outstanding outfit. I hear that all the time from different officers because they were the ones running it. And you would never say, man, it turns out I was a terrible commander. I could not get my guys to go in the same direction. I couldn't find anybody to go to the officer programs. I didn't get anybody over to the Green Berets, or whatever it is. No one says that, right? And so how do you actually know? Like, how do you know if your organization, look, I left the Army 3 times because the Army never even tried to keep me. Right. Like, I'm like, hey, I'm available to stay. What do you think? Nothing. Okay, great. I guess I'm going to leave 3 times. Right. I'm a talented dude. So you look around. When I left the regular Army, my commander is required to approach me and say, hey, what do we got to do to keep you around here? He didn't do that until I was like 3 weeks from getting out. It's like, too late. Hang up the phone. So how do you know? Like, as a leader, right? You're going to be out there. You're going to look around. You're going to work with young people that you're going to see. How do you know if your unit is good at taking that person, or are you going to make it worse for them? Like, hey, I think we should get you to go to, let's get you to OCS and let's see what we can make out of you. Because you also got to take care of your career too. And if you're bleeding your section drive talent, it's awful hard to lead that team.
Yes, definitely. So I think as a whole, we did a good job, but I can definitely identify some weak links in the chain, maybe I could say. Within one division, I know on the ship, I know that there was, one of the divos, my friends, they had a sailor that they were very interested in helping move on. I think they were trying to help them get to a different branch and become a pilot or something. But they were working with a warrant officer and a chief. So it wasn't just the divo. He wasn't the only person leading that division. And so the chief and the warrant officer did not like this sailor.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
But the divo saw a lot of potential in them, and maybe the divo was, this young kid straight out of college and didn't know anything, but they're like, there's some potential here, like let's get this guy out there and see how they do. And the old salty, seasoned guys were like, oh no, he's no good, like he's gonna cause all these problems. It's like, well, we got to give him a chance. If he doesn't make it to the school, then there's that, but we can't not send him, so you do have to face those issues. It's pretty challenging.
This reminds me of a funny story. So when I was in the Army, look, I can swim. I swim no problem. You throw me any kind of water, I can swim. I probably do 15 different strokes. I can invent strokes on the fly and swim those strokes. I'm not saying I'm fast. I'm just saying I'm real hard to drown. And so I go to my unit and I'm trying to be, fired up. Like I'm new to the unit and there's a tasking like, hey, we want an E5 or above, or maybe E6 or above, to be a lifeguard available to fulfill the lifeguard role. And I don't want to be a lifeguard, but I'm like, I've been a lifeguard. I'll raise my hand. I'm only an E4, but I promise I probably swim better than everybody in this battalion. And for the audience, battalion's like, it's 1,000 people. I'm probably, if I'm not the best swimmer, I'm in the top 3. And they'll like, yeah, you're right. You know what? That tasking probably could be filled by someone with a lower rank. And so they sent someone else instead of the guy who said, hey, I can do this. It just rank has nothing to do with my ability to lifeguard because I've been one. And they sent another guy who was an E4 and he failed the swim test. And like, see, we told you E4s couldn't do it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, I was glad to avoid the duty because I didn't want to be a lifeguard. But, it's like these kind of things where like, you didn't prove anything. You proved that you picked the wrong person. And I don't, maybe they didn't like me or whatever it was, but you can throw me in a pool right now. And as out of shape as I am, I'll go swim a mile right now. Like, it's just not a problem. Then instead of making a choice where you have an asset, we can put Pete to work as a lifeguard. Great, but they didn't. They these kind of things, man. It's weird. And you talked about the dynamic of like, well, we don't like that sailor. Maybe that sailor is disgruntled because you guys treat him like shit.
Yes. No, that never happens. That definitely was not the case. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It's so crazy. How does a sailor stand out? Okay, great. You're able to do your job. Like you're E4, E5. You're like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go do things. I'm going to read books. How does a sailor stand out to you? Like, when do you go, hey, that person requires some of my attention? Because your job is to develop people, to mentor, to get them at least from where they're at now to a better spot.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's see. I think having a positive attitude goes a very long way, especially on a ship where we spend a lot of time away from home. And then having a good work ethic as well is super important. And then just always having that desire to work on the next thing, kind of knowing where to place your priorities. There's a whole lot of attributes that go into standing out. But I can think of several examples, a whole list of examples of sailors that worked for me. And I was only involved in 2 divisions on the ship during my time there. But on any ship in the Navy, you're going to have a good handful of sailors that have so much potential. And then it's just a matter of working with those dynamics we were talking about of like, okay, who doesn't like this sailor? How can we, get around them and get this sailor into a good position and set them up for success? So you got to play a little bit of a politics game, but it's important.
Yeah. So, and I want to talk about leadership a little bit more, but I want to really wrap this up and maybe explore a little bit. But what is, like, you're newer to the Navy, right? You're not new anymore. You've been around, but you might be maybe for 35 more years. I mean, that's just how this stuff goes, right? What do you need to do? Like, where you're like, man, you know what? You're not saying you're weak, but where do you want to improve yourself? Like, I'm going to invest time and energy into these areas.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've got a decent list. So, something I want to do differently going into my next assignment is, as a leader, I want to do a better job of allowing my sailors to solve their own problems and come up with solutions to things before I feel the need to step in and solve their problem for them. Or I don't think that I very often am like, I'm going to do a better job than the sailor if I do it. But for me, it's more of like, I just want to help them. But letting them make mistakes, letting them fail, letting them learn and grow. And then that's also going to allow me, if I can build up a team of people who are able to solve their own problems consistently, then that frees up my time to focus on other things, personal development, other ways I can help out as the command as a whole versus just trying to hold my division together. I think if I can do a better job of that in my next assignment, my impact as a whole in the command is going to be a lot more positive. Whereas in my first command, there was a lot of me, kind of stumbling around as a leader, trying to figure out like, I just always wanted to help everyone that brought me a problem. And I think I maybe caused some problems just because I was so determined to solve every problem that came across my plate.
There's a great story of Joe Torre when he was running the Yankees. He goes out to talk to a pitcher because there's, a problem. There's a problem. There's too many people on base. And he comes out and he's like, talking. And the guy says, it doesn't matter who the pitcher is. The pitcher says to Joe Torre, get the fuck out of here. I'm going to get this guy out. And then Joe looks at him and goes, well, what the fuck am I doing here? And then he walks away. It's like, all right, you're going to solve this problem yourself. I'm just going to let you do it. Like, but that takes confidence, right? Because there's a career aspect to, I'm going to allow these guys to do this. And they really, in a lot of ways, they have your success in their hands. And you're trying to allow that to foster and grow. And that's great leadership. But boy, there's risk in that because that's going to bite you in the butt at some point, right? Like if you let your guys do things, and especially if they do it in their own way and they get it done, but if they don't and it gets bad, that puts light on you. And then the thing I always need is I need someone above me who's got a giant ass that can be chewed on. They're like, yeah, you can chew on me all you want. You're not touching Pete because you need Pete more than I do, And that kind of a leader who's got this giant butt that can be chewed on all days, man, I love to work for those kind of people because I'm supposed to be making mistakes. I'm on the very tip of the spear and it's wiggly and pointy out there, right? So adjust me, but don't throw me away because I'm trying to make a call in a moment where it's very tough to do. And you may not even understand the context in which I'm working, right? And so how do you build that muscle, that big butt that can be chewed on and accept that I'm going to be a great leader. I have to give these guys a chance to do things I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, that's difficult. That's part of the what I want to improve and how I want to be better. So I don't know if I can give the best answer currently, but I think that especially as a surface warfare officer, we're put in positions where the sailors under us have so much more technical knowledge and expertise, and the schools they've been to have trained them to solve these problems. And it's just a matter as a surface warfare officer where I'm managing electricians or I'm managing people that maintain firefighting and emergency rescue equipment. I just need to learn how to motivate them, and it becomes like a leadership or just human interpersonal communications problem of how do I get to know this person, understand what makes them tick, and then make this rewarding for them, make it so that they want to go out and solve problems, and then basically get out of their way at that point. And then, like you said, as the problems that come from letting people have greater responsibility and make bigger decisions, as those inevitable problems come up, now my job is I need to go face the boss above me and answer for my crimes, and those and knowing when to step in is also important, because the people under you aren't always going to make the best decisions, and you do need to step in sometimes and prevent things from happening. So that's a difficult problem, but I think it's one that's really fun and exciting, and it's one that I look forward to continuing to get better at as I go on in my career.
I love it. Yeah, sometimes weird things happen and the entire ship is gutted and ruined, because something happened, right? Could anyone have led them out of that? Maybe, right? You're doing your best now to do that. It is tough, though, to have the courage to stand in front of someone and stand up for your guys and say, it's my call. I made it. It didn't work out. We're on it. We're correcting it. What else do you need from me, boss? And they're like, well, drive on. It's like, I'm going to get out of your way. I need you to improve. You're telling me you're improving right now? Well, then good. I'm glad we made this mistake and we got past it. And look, sometimes mistakes they sting. They causing those things I've done as a spy. I'm like, oh my God, that's such a bad mistake. And they still hit me emotionally, but thank goodness I made those mistakes so I could reduce the amount of mistakes I make in the future.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah, I could look back and tell all kinds of stories of how ridiculous I was. Like, man, I absolutely should have known better. In, you know, that instance, or, you know, whatever. But
Yeah.
you just gotta learn from it, move forward.
Yeah.
Luckily, none of my mistakes have led to catastrophic results. But you know, you
Yeah.
still hard to look back and be like, man, I was so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, in my line of work, it's important to have a couple things mastered, and one is relevance to the commander. If I can develop relevance to the commander, that'll bleed down into relevance to the staff. So I've got to focus on being important to that commander so that they can see that I'm showing them things they need to see to change what they're doing and improve. Because I don't need to give them the answers. I just need to illustrate, like, hey, boss, this isn't working the way you want it to work. I don't think. Here's what I'm seeing, and then let them do that. The other thing, though, is it's safer. It's more comfortable. Everybody wants you to be at a desk doing desk work. But what nobody wants you to do is to go off the camp all the time and gather information, especially when most of my information comes back saying this ain't working, right? And so it's way easier. And so, like, you know, every night I'll go on patrol because that's my job. My job is to go off the camp. I know that. It doesn't say that in the rule books, doesn't say that in the guidebooks, but I know that I'm the most valuable when I'm off camp. But I have to stay on camp often enough to remain relevant. Like, everybody can want to be Lawrence. Lawrence Arabia's problem was he was so distant from the command that when he showed up, he had no weight with them. And so you have to balance that connection. In my line of work, you have to balance that connection between the field and the command. And then there's a third element is you've got to master yourself too. Because I promise, like, when I'm like, it's like 108 degrees at night and we're going to go out, and I look at my interpreter and we look at our gear, and I'm like, I could cancel this mission right now, you know, our part of it, but they're still going to go out. They're going to put 2 more butts in those seats, and they're going to be on the road, and they're going to go. Like, it would be so nice to rest. I am so exhausted, but nope, got to do it. Got to get up and go. And so you have to master your own, like, there's plenty of, like, if I'm working for somebody else and I'm like, we're going out right now, I'm like, oh God, it's the last thing I want to do. I want to go in the chow hall, have some ice cream, go get a workout, take a nap, and then get back to work tomorrow or something, right? You know, you get like the no workies, right? But you know, it's not easy to see that. You need time and space in terms of a career to see, like, what it matters to decide within your field how it is that you help any commander at any time on any mission.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another aspect where it's funny because as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, like I do that in this aspect of my job and that aspect of my job. So it's like, you know, you're a spy in the Army. I'm a, you know, an officer on a Navy ship. There's a lot of things that are different about what we did, but there's a lot of similarity as well. And I think, you know, how can I help, excuse me, the commander of our ship? Sorry. So how can I help him keep the ship running, you know? And you know, he can't keep this ship running by himself. Even if it's, you know, him and me, like him and I together, we're not going to keep this ship running. There's a whole team of people that have to keep this ship running. So, you know, how can I support the captain in that mission that he has to keep the ship running? And really it's you know, the job of all of us here on the ship to do this. But as a division officer, what can I do? What's my part? You know, and I personally liked to, when I was walking my spaces, grab a broom, help my sailors, you know, sweep a P-way, like that kind of thing. But there were some times where that wasn't appropriate, because if I was in a P-way helping one sailor, then, you know, my other sailors goofing off on their cell phone during sweepers in the other P-way, and in that instance, I'm not doing my job as a division officer because I'm sticking in one P-way sweeping when I should be roaming the P-ways, making sure, you know, at least while I walk past, my sailors are pretending to sweep. And then maybe when I'm done roaming the P-ways, I can help out for the last few minutes of sweepers before we have to move on to the next thing. So, you know, that's maybe one of the more mundane tasks that a Divo does in a day, is walk their spaces during sweepers and make sure their sailors are sweeping. That's another thing. Every sailor is a janitor. But but
That's
because you got to
true.
keep you got to keep the ship clean, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, a
but
ship literally is a giant garbage can, right? Like you're like, hey, we got to
yes,
pick everything up because otherwise it gets messy fast, you know?
yep, and
And
then that's more things to catch fire. But
yeah, more
but
places for rats, everything. Yeah, it gets ugly
yes,
fast.
I always I thought I was hilarious. I would bring my dust pan to the garbage at the end of sweepers, and I'd look over to whatever sailor was near me, and I'd be like, look at all these terrorists, like the enemies of democracy and freedom that I've defeated today. And I'd dump my dustpan
Yeah.
into the garbage can at the end of sweepers. And they always laughed. But I don't know. I think as a leader, you got to try to make it fun when you can. And
Yeah.
also help them see like, hey, if I'm taking time to go out and sweep during sweepers, hopefully you'll see that that's important for all of us to do. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
asking you to go out and sweep and then hopping on the computer.
Right.
I'm saying, hey, go sweep, and I'm gonna help out too. Like, we all got to do this. So
Yeah.
that's one way that, like you're saying, what can I do as a division officer? How can I stay relevant to the commander?
Yeah.
As a leader, how can I best use my time during sweepers? That's just
Yeah.
one example of one thing we do every single day in the Navy, where it's
Every
like,
day.
you can make an impact as a leader just during sweepers, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then, that's like 30 minutes out of the day, an hour maybe. What
Yeah.
about the rest of the day? Like, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. So there's always ways you can do better, things you can learn. And it's just a matter of keeping at it, not getting tired. Like you were saying, you can give
Yeah.
up.
Oh my gosh.
I can go hop on the computer as soon as I'm done
Yeah.
walking my spaces. And, that's, most people aren't going to say anything about that,
Yeah.
but I know it's going to be more impactful for me to go out and sweep for that 10 minutes than it
Yeah.
is for me to do 10 minutes of work on the computer that I can just do a little bit later,
Right. Right. Yeah. No, it's a great point. Part of my relevance exercise is I had to learn how to become relevant to sergeant major. And look, there's not many people that have a more silly job than an Army sergeant major, command sergeant major while deployed. Like, there are certain things they have to do, but a lot of the time they don't really have a real job. I'm going to say that out loud. And they can kill you. They are super influential. And so I learned to go to the sergeant major and say, hey, listen, I go on a lot of patrols all across your battalion or brigade. And what I'd like to do is tell you when I see good and bad things, because I know what right looks like, and it's not my job to correct, and I never would do that. But sometimes you need to know what's going on so you can do. And they would look at me and be like, "You do that for me?" And I'm like, "You got to protect me. You can't ever say that I said anything because I got to go on patrol with these guys." And then I would just do that, and I wouldn't tell on them. I would say, "Listen, the guys in Vehicle 5, they're not securing all their stuff, and I'll ride in that vehicle with them because we got a job to do, but it'd make me feel a whole lot better, if they had secure, because when you're in an unwrap, if that thing starts rolling around, anything loose is going to be lethal. It's too dangerous." And they would look at me and be like, "Oh my God, yeah, you know what? I'm going to take care of that." Or, "Hey, I saw some guys on top of the unwrap, they didn't have their helmets on. I know and so they would do, but I would also say, guys in Vehicle 4, man, they're squared away. That NCO had them doing everything. It was super efficient. You could tell that guy cares about them. And I spent more time on that side of it. But that allowed me to stay relevant to the sergeant major so that he could get some ground truth himself. As much as I'm helping the commander understand how the whole machine works, hey, sergeant major, this is how your NCOs are working. And they love to hear the good news as much as the bad news. And they were always great. They're always like, "I got your back, Pete." And that made me relevant to those guys in a way that was really incredible, because then they'd come up to me later on and be like, "You and my buddy Rich, you guys have changed how this entire brigade does operations. And only you two guys turned the entire orientation of what we did, and we couldn't have done it without you." And that's partly because we spent time talking to that dude.
Yep, that's awesome. I think yeah, we have like the CO that manages the whole ship, or XO, the command
Yeah.
master chief. They've got a lot on their plate, and they kind of have to learn who in the wardroom, who in the chief's mess, who in the first class mess is
Yeah.
gonna be there for them and help them out. And who's not all the divos walk their spaces during sweepers, so who are my
Right.
divos that walk their spaces? Who can I talk to when I have this
Yeah.
problem, that problem? So trying to be the person that doesn't hop on the computer during sweepers, but goes out and walks. I know I'm using that example a lot, but
Yeah.
you know,
But it's a mundane task that you absolutely, as an officer, can be like, yeah, you guys are going to go sweep the hallways, and I'm going to rely on my NCOs to do their damn job. And if they don't, guess whose ass I'm going to go get? I'm going to go get those NCOs. Be like, I have to go walk around in these things, you know. And
yeah,
it's a great example. Let's get past all that, and I'm going to let you ask me some questions because this should be more of a conversation, and I want to make sure you get a chance to work on whatever it is that you want to know.
absolutely. So going back to just like interacting with people from other cultures, you know, those sorts of things. Let's say you found yourself on a Navy ship, you're going on a port visit. What's some advice, you know, if, you know, one of my sailors happens to come listen to this podcast and they're about to go out in town and, you know, either do what they normally do or maybe do something a little different because they heard some good advice from Mr. Turner. What advice? What advice maybe do you have?
I don't know that I have good advice. I have uncle advice, but you know, those guys, they do need to go blow off steam, right? And that's part of the Navy culture. It's part of what you guys do. And I'm not saying that you guys have a bad culture. I'm just saying that you have young people going to exotic places and they're going to go do whatever they've always done since there's ever been a Navy. So I wouldn't want to have changed that. And I wouldn't put so much emphasis on how they behaved on being in port. I would teach them instead to how to have a little bit of cultural intelligence. Like, we're always focused on emotional intelligence. I'm an empath. Okay, that's adorable, but can you go into any culture anywhere and see it and recognize that it's slightly different and be okay with it? You don't have to change anybody else's way of doing anything. You also don't have to necessarily change your way, but it's a gentle curiosity. It's like, hey, you know, so I go to Egypt. I'm in Cairo, and I've got time to kill, and so I see this kid, and I'm like, hey, where should I go have lunch? And the kid's like, well, if you'll pay me some money, I'll take you all over town, and I'll just be your buddy for the day. And I'm like, how much that cost? And basically, it was like $1. I'm like, I'll give you $2, right? Let's just go out and have a good time. And that guy took me on the best tour of like real Cairo, you know, his Cairo, as opposed to something else. And so I'd rather see someone not be afraid of culture and interact like, how do you guys do this? And here's how I do it, you know, and exchange that culture and get comfortable with, because it's not comfortable to do that. You know, it's easier to like, there's a McDonald's in any country in the world. I'm going to go to this McDonald's and I'm going to eat there. Like, no, go find someone and say, hey, I'm looking to get the best, whatever, you know, I don't know, whatever place you want to name, you know, the best Suriname experience ever. You know, where should I go have dinner? And they're like, oh, you got to go down over to, you know, to Bob's and go do that. So I would rather they pursue cultural intelligence and be able to develop the muscle where they can go anywhere. And instead of worrying about how to not offend or whatever, like if you're going to go out and have a good time and kick up your heels and raise some hell, that's fine. Ask the locals, like, where do you guys go to do this kind of thing? We're in town. I want to have a great time. I want to see some girls, or I want to see some dudes. I want to go dancing all night. Where do you guys think I should go? And maybe that's not what a naval commander wants to hear, but that's how I'm going to gear people is like, be comfortable with what's comfortable for them. Obviously, don't break any laws, don't harm anybody, but be okay with things being a little uncomfortable and a little bit different, because that's how you learn how to blend into different cultures, because it shouldn't be your way. You should be out of sorts, and that's okay. You're like, wow, this is totally different how you guys eat your food, and I love being part of this experience. If I could give them that, I would rather have them have that than worry about being on their best behavior. I'm going to give you an example of this. So we were going to Cairo, and the Army is like, you know, this is the Army trip to the pyramids. You will not, blah, 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 you know, and they give all the briefing and everything. And they made, there's a very pretty young officer lady, and she was well endowed in the boob area. And so she had a sweater set on, but there's nothing she can do to hide her big boobs because she's got big boobs. And so they said, ma'am, you cannot wear that sweater set. It's a sweater set. There's no skin showing or nothing. She just has boobs. And you're like, you have to put something more modest on. And so she does. We wait. She goes back to her hooch and comes back. And this all takes a long time because it's not like, you know, she lives right next to the bus stop. And so she comes back on it. She's wearing something that's, you know, a little bit more mundane. And again, sweater set. This was not racy stuff. We get to the pyramids, and there's a Polish girl who's wearing a tube top, heels, and tiny shorts, and she's just bouncing and just openly sexy by just walking on this broken ground. And I'm like, look how ridiculous this is, right? You have someone, she wasn't at all being provocative or anything, this officer lady. And here's this Polish girl who's barely wearing clothes, and they're in the same space. And I went up to her and I'm like, isn't that funny? You know, that girl over there who's beautiful and she's doing what she needs to do, but you had to put on this smock to not offend anybody, and no one's offended by this Polish girl. You know, like everybody's like, wow, she looks like $1,000,000. You know, so there's these kind of things where what we think we should be doing, and just simply asking, like, you know, look, when I'm in combat and I go see someone who's on the Afghanistan side of the government or Iraq or whatever, I'm going to say, hey, I'd like to come see you. Can I get an appointment with you next week? And they're like, wait, you're going to ask me for an appointment? I'm like, yeah. Well, I mean, I would do that in the States. How do you guys set up meetings? They're like, yeah, we do appointments too. So I don't just tell you where to be. I don't just show up unannounced. And they're like, yeah, wouldn't that be great if you just respected my time? And I'm like, I do respect your time. When can I show up? How should I show up? Do you want to meet here? Do you want to meet somewhere else? And they would tell me exactly this is how I'd love you to do it, because that would make it easier on me. Well, then that's how I'm going to do it, because it's my job to be uncomfortable, because I'm here trying to help you. And so that's what I would want to give those guys.
Awesome. Love it.
Yeah.
I think I do worry a lot about, like offending people, or if they'll think it's weird, whatever I'm doing. But I think that's really good advice. Just have that conversation, be okay with going out and maybe being a little uncomfortable. And I have had some really good experiences meeting people and getting to know them, having them show me around, where they're from. I'm like on the other side of the world and I'm seeing the coolest things. And it just came from having those conversations. So, yeah.
What part of America are you from? Like, what town did you grow up in?
So I was born in Sacramento. My dad was in the Army, so I grew up on Army bases all over the place until I was about 13. And then we moved to a city called Galt, California, the southern part of Sacramento, California. Sacramento
I know exactly
County.
Where Galt is. Yes.
Yep. Raised some dairy goats, until I went to Sac State. But yeah, I'm from the Sacramento area.
All right. So I know Sacramento really well. I was there last week, right? And I've lived in Sacramento. So, but let's say I hadn't. And let's say I came to you and I was visiting the younger version of you in Galt. And I started telling you that Sacramento downtown is way better than Galt. And I know the best restaurant to go to, and come on, let's go. Like, that's just being a shitty guest, right? But if I came to you and said, I've never been to Galt in my life, what is your town like? Show me the greatness of it. And so, like, if I did that here in my hometown of Benicia, where I grew up, I'd be like, I'm going to show you where the Zodiac Killer killed people. And I'm going to show you where Gravity Hill, which is right down there by it, and I'm going to take you down by the water. Because if you see those three things in Benicia, you're getting like the coolest, funnest stuff about town. And so then you just shut up and go for this ride. And you're like, tell me about the Zodiac Killer. I don't know anything about it. Oh my God, I can't wait to tell you all about it. And that person would just flow information out of them. So if you do go to Cairo, or you go to any old place, you're in Munich, or you're in Stuttgart, wherever it is that you end up, just let them be great hosts. Let them be like excited about where they're from. And if it's all bad and you're like, I hate Portugal and I don't want to talk about it. Like, okay, great. What do you want to talk about? Like, where do you go? Like, screw Portugal. Where do you go? What do you love? And then they're going to show you what they love. And there's no, like, you don't have to worry about offense, because now you're just being curious and you're being a good guest. Being a good guest is harder than just, it's look, you have to say, yeah, I'll take. Like, if I go to a foreign country and someone says, do you want a shot? I'm going to say yes every single time. Yes, of course I want a shot. Yeah, I'm in uniform. My job is to have good relations with this person. I'm a spy. I'm not going to say no to these things. I want advantages. And so that's like really, that's where it comes down to. Does that take some courage on the leader's part to allow me to go do that? Hey, Pete, you got invited into a mosque. You're not supposed to go in a mosque. That's against the rules. And I'm like, that's against your rules. That's against not my rules. My job is to go get into places where you guys can't get into, so I can help you find things out that no one else can find out. So you stay outside of the mosque. Good idea. I'm going to go in because I've been invited.
Yeah. Wow. That was awesome. I think, hey, Sailor Timmy, if you were listening to the last 5 minutes of this show, you got some gold. Yeah, I love that. I think if we could just focus on being good guests and, maybe not being so embarrassed about, doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, but just like you said, asking people what's the best thing to do here, and listening to them, go experience what they say. and obviously be safe, because there are people out there
Of course.
that, you know, will see
Yeah.
a U.S.
Yeah.
soldier and want to take advantage of them, but
Yeah.
have fun.
And no one's giving a license or anybody to go, you know, do anything that's, you know, they would think would be inappropriate, right? Like if you do want to go kick up your heels and get rowdy, okay, great. Again, the Navy has, Army does, we all do that, right? But understand, like if you're going to be working in a cross-cultural environment, you got a little more responsibility when it comes to those things. The other thing I would say is, this is just like a good rule of thumb: don't try to out Iraq and Iraqi. Don't try to out Galt a Galt person, or don't try to out Central Valley the Central Valley person. Learn from them. Even if you're from the Central Valley, you know how different Galt is from Fresno? Oh my God, right? Like it's a totally different place. And so, you know, just allow them to know more than, even if you make a, like I would do this all the time. I would tell my interpreter, if I ask a question, you know, I know the answer to, I want you to still ask it because I want their answer. I might know all about Ramadan because I've studied and everything else. That doesn't mean I know about their Ramadan. Like if I was to go to your family home in Galt for Christmas, I'm not going to think I know how you guys do Christmas. Is there going to be a big meal? Sure, but maybe you guys do a goose, maybe you do a turkey, maybe you're sick of all that stuff and you do a ham. I don't know until I sit there and experience it with you guys. I can make some assumptions, probably be pretty accurate, but until I go and experience Doermann family Christmas, I don't know what it is. And so I have to let it be what it is. And when I see something interesting, even if I don't agree with it, I got to go, tell me about that. Oh, that's an heirloom. That's our heirloom nativity set that was brought over from Ireland. Oh, no kidding. Wow. You know, and then you can have this conversation. And again, I've got you guys talking about what you're passionate about. And that puts me in a very good spot in terms of my work, because now I've got you talking, I've got you excited. And now I can sit back and just kind of not guide, but I can create a conversation that allows me to learn something that nobody else on my patrol is going to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for the advice. That's really great.
You know, you do got to be a good leader and be like, yeah, these guys are going to screw up a little bit, you know, but yeah, that's helpful. What else do you got?
Oh, I don't know. I think maybe now I'm going to Bahrain for my next assignment, right? And there's this new culture. I'm going to go, you know, meet a bunch of people, you know, and I'm interested maybe in sharing some of the things I learn with people back here in the States who maybe don't even know where Bahrain is, or the fact that we've had such a long history of very close partnership with Bahrain. But we're all, you know, busy talking about Afghanistan, Iraq, like we don't even know who Bahrain is half the time, you know, more than half the time, but they've been so instrumental in our ability to operate in the Middle East. And they're a super interesting, fun place. I think, do you think if I made like YouTube videos of some of the cool things I see over there, or maybe I should do some more like podcast stuff? Like what are some effective ways that you think that I could capture my experiences and share them with people back here in the States?
I would encourage you to not say effective, and I would say chase affect. If you can find emotions, you're going to find something that's going to matter to someone, whether they reject it or accept it. So I would look for those things. Look for things that inspire you and capture them. And for sure, blog, vlog, podcast, whatever it is. And I would meet as many of those local people as you're able, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, you may never go back to Bahrain in a professional capacity again. You may go to, it turns out, oh, you're going to specialize in Africa instead of Southwest Asia, you know, and you're never going to be near there again. So I would just soak up every opportunity to get to know the local folks and have them show you how to be great from being from Bahrain. Like what's a great guest for you guys? Like, what do you guys want to know about? What do you want to learn about? And then share your stuff back. So I would absolutely capture those moments in a journal, in a vlog, whatever it is. And obviously keep yourself out of trouble. But yeah, I think that's magical, because if you asked what was Bahrain like 40 years ago, 100 years ago, what are the things? I mean, the Arab culture is 3,000 years old. Think about that. Like if you talked about the last 20 years, you've ignored 99% of their history, you know? So,
yes.
And then I would go talk to their scholarly people and their religious people and just get to know what those guys are all about, because it turns out for them, religion's a big part of who they are. They don't have a separation of church and state like we do. And that is such a foreign concept and it's so uncomfortable. You can go learn about that. I'm about to have a conversation where we're done here. I'm going to call a guy and talk about chaplains and deployed environments and how it's problematic to just send a chaplain out and think that because they've got a cross on their uniform or a Star of David or a crescent, that all of a sudden they know how to engage people in other religions. That's not necessarily true. So you can look for those things and capture them. And I think you'll look back on that time, and even nobody else ever watches it, I think you'll find value and lessons in it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm not an author or a YouTuber or anything like that, but I do think I have a pretty interesting opportunity ahead of me to have fun, meet some really awesome people, and
that's great.
Hopefully share an awesome place with some sort of audience so that they can get to know Bahrain a little better.
I love it. All right, man, I'm going to wrap this thing up. Anything in closing?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I really was excited to connect with you and learn from you. And then, of course, discuss some of the stuff I've learned so far in this little career I've had.
Yeah, well, you're doing great, man. It's super excited to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. Stand by 1 second. I'm going to shut this thing down. I'll come right back to you. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so